2024 has been a wild year for the alternative rock music scene. Linkin Park is back,
Paramore opened for Taylor Swift,
and a lot of the bands that we grew up with are back in the spotlight again. There's no doubt that something has been brewing for the last few years. Hi, I'm Hannah, aka Face of the Music, and let's dive into why alt-rock is making a comeback and why it is needed. So what is alternative rock or alt-rock? It's more of an umbrella term that covers a mix of sounds, whether it's grunge, punk, nu metal, or even emo. It could also be defined as a style of rock music characterized as unconventional or outside the mainstream, which is slightly ironic because back in the late 90s and early 2000s, alt-rock was huge. From Nirvana to My Chemical Romance, it dominated the charts and it gave a voice to a generation. After the rise of EDM and pop in the 2010s, it seemed to just fade into the background, younger generations seemingly growing up without the influence of rock music. But why is it making a comeback now? One theory is that trends work in a 20-year cycle, or the 20-year rule as it's also known. The idea is that every 20 years, things that were once popular come back around, and it's become a staple in the fashion industry to predict trends. That's hard to say fast, predict trends. Although it was originally created to determine fashion trends, a lot of people think it applies to other things, including music. And I think we can't forget as well that fashion is influenced by a lot of other sources, like social media, even the economy, but of course, music. The early 2000s was 20 years ago now, and Y2K influence has been really, really big, and it definitely proves this rule. What's more as well is musicians like Machine Gun Kelly and Yungblud have led a younger punk revival over the last few years, bringing pop punk slightly more back into the mainstream. It's essentially an updated 2000 sound. Now, for millennials, this triggers a feeling of nostalgia, while for the younger Gen Z, it's fresh and exciting. TikTok, or the TikTok effect as it's now been dubbed, has become a massive force in today's music landscape. Unlike past decades where popular culture was centered around a few trends,
we're now seeing the rise of something called micro trends.
Now, this shift has enabled alt-rock to find a new audience, and younger listeners can discover and share music that stands apart from the mainstream, especially where the app does tend to favour more niche community-driven content. But it is a little bit like, to become relevant to the younger generation, you need to make an impact on TikTok. Perhaps one of the clearest signs that alt-rock is making a comeback is Linkin Park's return. After the tragic loss of Chester Bennington, the band returned with what's being dubbed a new era. And let's be real, this has sent shockwaves through the community. And despite dividing a loyal fan base, their music has performed really well. And it could be argued that this evolution has broadened their appeal and opened the door to a wider fan base across generations. Now, speaking of bridging the gap, Paramore has been one of the biggest alt-rock names for nearly 2 decades. But here's something I did not see coming. Paramore opened for Taylor Swift on the European leg of her tour. Now, if you're a former emo kid, you may have shed a tear when you saw TikTok searches going, "Who are Paramore?"
Leg of Eras tour, and you do not know who Paramore is, you do not deserve to be there.
Paramore's fan base has always been diverse, but opening for Taylor Swift meant that fans who came for Swift's pop music were exposed to Paramore's more energetic emo sound. Now, across the board, bands from the 2000s are coming back strong, whether it's through reunion tours, new albums, or even festivals. We've seen bands like My Chemical Romance, Green Day, Blink-182 make a comeback, and festivals like Sick New World and When We Were Young are also a major part of this revival. These festivals are essentially like a time capsule, packed with the biggest names from the 2000s alternative scenes. This is the 2025 lineup that's not long been released. Now, these aren't just nostalgic acts. These bands are selling out massive festivals. proving there is still an appetite for this music. Even on TikTok, we could see the amount of younger people at these events enjoying these bands whose biggest hits probably were before these were even born. But here's the thing, we're living in a much different world to that of the late 90s and early 2000s. It's one now that's shaped by cancel culture and social media. For example, the Linkin Park comeback hasn't been without controversy. And with the rise of TikTok and the micro trend, it does mean that trends come and go quicker. Some would even argue that the 20-year rule is now less applicable because of social media and fast fashion. In a time where it's easier than ever to experiment with self-expression and be introduced to music far greater than generations before, perhaps it carries a far greater pressure, and perhaps people do want to conform a little bit more than we did when we were teenagers. Could the likes of Instagram and the social media star completely counteract the new pop punk way that's been introduced again? Now, I think it's important to note that this music never went away. It just moved away from the mainstream for a little bit. And of course, a lot of elder emos, as they're now being dubbed, have kids and jobs and may not be able to present themselves as emo, goth, punk in the same way they did in their youth, but still enjoyed the music. The appetite for this music has always been there. It was just patiently waiting for its time to shine again. Statistics show that 36% of 18 to 29-year-olds in the US listen to rock, alternative or indie music on the radio, which isn't all that different from the 43% of 30 to 49-year-olds. So maybe there is less of a generational gap than we think. Let's not forget as well that something like punk rock has always maintained an underground presence. A great example of this is the Australian punk scene. It's always been there, but it's gained traction in the last few years. A band like Emil and the Sniffers gets millions of views on YouTube and even played at Glastonbury in 2022. But why is this mainstream alt-rock revival needed? It does feel like we've been hit with a heavy wave of EDM over the past decade, and change is good. It's refreshing. It gives listeners something new to dive into. We've even seen the rise of country music dominating the charts, even over here in the UK, and this seems to all be in favour of EDM. But for me, it's more than just the music trends. Rock, and especially punk, has always been about rebellion. It's a genre that challenges the status quo. Whilst mainstream pop tends to push conformity, alt-rock is all about embracing individuality. For teenagers, alt-rock speaks to their angst, their desire to be different, and whether you love them or hate them, artists like Machine Gun Kelly and Yungblud are at least pushing the idea that it's okay to be different. And in a world where trends come and go, it's that message of authenticity that truly matters. Please let me know what you think. Have you noticed a rise in alternative rock culture? And do you think this comeback has been much needed? Please also make sure to drop me a subscribe and also like and comment on this video if you feel like you would like to. It is helpful to me as I'm just starting out. Anyway, I will see you very, very soon for my next video. Thank you for watching.